Welcome to today's webinar on security implications of Oracle E-Business Suite 12.1.3, End of Support. My name is Phil Ryman. I am the Director of Business Development at Integrigy, and I'll be the moderator for this e-learning session. Speaker today is Stephen Coast. Steve is the Chief Technology Officer and founder of Integrigy Corporation. He's been working with Oracle products since 1994, and for the past 17 years, Steve has focused on the security and auditing aspects of the Oracle E-Business Suite and Oracle database, and has written and presented on these topics at various national and regional conferences. Steve is recognized internationally for his vast security knowledge and expertise, and I'll now turn it over to Steve.
Thanks so much, Phil. Today we're going to talk about Oracle E-Business Suite 12.1.3 and the upcoming end of support date. I'll go through the different terminology based on Premier Support, Extended Support, and Sustaining Support, but this presentation will focus in on the security implications. You hear a lot of talk and discussion, and probably had some webinars and other things talking about the upgrade process, what does Desupport mean. This presentation will focus on purely the security aspects. So if you're going to plan to stay on 12.1.3, what are some of the security implications of that decision? And what are some things you can do to actually improve the security of the environment, even though you're supported by Oracle? Before we get started, a very quick background about Integrigy. Integrigy was founded in 2002 by former Big Six consultants working on large ERP projects, mostly Oracle Business Suite. Back then, people weren't changing the app's password. We've come a long ways from then. But again, Oracle Business Suite is a very large, complex application. There's a lot of security issues, weaknesses, nuances within the application, and that's what we specialize here at Integrigy. We help you secure your Oracle Business Suite environment, and we do that two different ways. One is we have a set of products, the first being AppSentry, which validates the security of Oracle Business Suite and the database and the application server. So if you try to go through the Oracle Secure Configuration Guide for the Oracle Business Suite, which was written by Integrigy, and try to do that manually, it's very difficult. AppSentry basically takes that security configuration checklist and automates it, but also does hundreds of more checks. So very robust, very in-depth checking to validate that your Oracle Business Suite environment, as well as PeopleSoft and Oracle databases and SQL Server environments, are secure. Proactive layer of defense is our AppDefend product, which is an enterprise application firewall dedicated for Oracle Business Suite. AppDefend protects the application from known security vulnerabilities, unknown security vulnerabilities, and adds in a number of other features to help protect the application, especially if you have exposed it to the DMZ on the internet. A lot of the work around this presentation comes from our services team, where we do on-site security assessments. We're working actively with organizations to help them review, validate the security of their Oracle Business Suite environments and database environments, as well as helping clients with very complex compliance challenges around SOX, PCI, HIPAA, GDPR. And finally, we also help a lot of clients implement different products doing security design work around auditing, logging, encryption, and helping them implement products like Oracle Database Vault, Oracle Transparent Data Encryption, and Perla and Guardium. Finally, we're backed up by a world-class research team internally that we're actively working with Oracle every single day, finding security bugs, how to actually improve the Oracle products around Oracle Business Suite, PeopleSoft, and Oracle Database. And finally, we're an Oracle Gold Partner. Enough about Integrigy. We'll kind of jump into the topic here and really walk through Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3 and the upcoming Desupport. And what is Desupport? So Desupport is fundamentally a concept from Oracle that eventually at the end of term, Oracle will desupport you in terms of certain functionalities and features of the support. Basically removing support from your organization, from your Oracle Business Suite or your database. We'll kind of cover both the Oracle Business Suite and the database in this presentation. So the Oracle promises you lifetime support. And lifetime support is they'll take your phone call. As long as you keep paying them that annual maintenance fee, they'll definitely take your phone call. And the support goes through a number of different stages. It starts out with Premier Support, which is for 5 years from the release. And again, every single product is different. These timelines are not fixed, but generally the support dates follow this timeline. So Premier Support is, again, 5 years. You get security patches in the form of critical patch updates. You get very good support. Extended Support is then available for an additional 3 years. Extended support also includes the security patches and critical patch updates. And depending on the product version, time frame, there may be an additional fee, there may not be. The additional fee for extended support is often waived for the first year, maybe waived for a specific product that can't be upgraded based on support structures from Oracle, things like that. But again, under Premier and extended support, you're getting security patches. Oracle's taking your call, they're developing patches for you, and everything works as is. Products then move into sustaining support. And the biggest change about sustaining support is that there are no more security patches. There's no more critical patch updates developed for that product version under sustaining support. Again, Oracle will take your phone call under sustaining support as long as you're paying that annual maintenance fee, and they do require to help support you to have a minimum level of patches. The reason we're talking today is because Oracle E-Business Suite 12.1.3 is moving to sustaining support at the end of the year. So all these guidelines are actually well laid out in a series of Oracle documents. So I've kind of laid out the My Oracle Support node IDs here. So if you have any questions about this, you can go to Oracle Support, pull up these support IDs for each product and get a better understanding. These go in deep detail about kind of what's supported, dates, and things like that. So let's talk about Oracle E-Business Suite. Let's talk about very much in detail. A lot of this presentation will be talking about dates and versions and things like that, so you get a really good understanding about kind of where you are today and what you need to be thinking about in the future. First and foremost, Oracle E-Business Suite 12.2 will be supported until December 2032. And for E-Business Suite 12.2, they're extending that date every year. So for the most recent version of Oracle Business Suite, you have a very long runway. So you've got a good 2 year or 10 years, and Oracle is actually extending that every year as long as there's enough demand from customers. The discussion here is around Oracle Business Suite 12.1, which the Premier support end date is ending December 2021. Because we're talking about security implications in this call, I'm going to really focus in on the critical patch updates. Again, the critical patch updates are the security patches for Oracle products. The security patches are released each quarter in January, April, July, and October. So as a security person, when I'm talking about a support end date, I'm mostly concerned about when the security patches will be released. And that is really the effective end date of support in our minds. Even though this will go through December 2021, the last security patches released will be October 2021. So this is kind of an important concept. So you'll see kind of the dates in here, but we're mostly focused in and around the security patches and availability of those. If you're currently running 12.0 or 11.5, those have been desupported since January 2015 and January 2016 respectively. One caveat around all these support dates is Oracle does have, under their advanced support team, something called market-driven support. So you can actually pay an additional fee above and beyond the extended support fees to actually have support moving forward. So for Oracle Business Suite 12.1, starting in January 2022 and continuing through the end of 2023, there is an additional support offering available for an additional fee. That is also currently available for 11.5.10, that you can actually have an advanced support contract or market-driven support for those. So again, security patches are available under that market-driven support. We don't have a lot of customers who uptake that just due to the cost, but that is definitely an option if you are stuck, unable to upgrade, and are looking for actual support. So a little about the technology stack of Oracle Business Suite. So when we think about the technology stack, we've got the application, but below the application is the database, application server, and Java components running. There's a number of other things that potentially you may be running, but these are really the big three. So if we think about the database support for 12.1.3 as of today, only Oracle 19c is fully supported for security patches, and that is supported by 12.1.3, and the security patch updates will be available through April 2027 through extended support. When I talk about extended support, there may be a fee. So if you find yourself in April of 2026 you probably are paying extended support fees to be running 19C in order to get the security patches and any other severity 1 fixes. The one issue here is we have a lot of customers on 11.204. So I'll also touch base throughout this presentation talking not only about 12.1.3 but 11.204 because the extended support date for 11.204 ended as of October 2020. However, again, footnote 3 here is there is a market-driven support option for 11.204, the database. Those Oracle customers on the call who have recently upgraded to 12.102, because again, you may have been on 11.204 at the end of the year, you said, hey, we need to get upgraded to 12.102. Note that 12.102 for the database is supported through July 2022. And that is a special date for Oracle Business Suite customers. So Oracle has waived some fees for Oracle Business Suite customers specifically. That date should be July 2021, but they've actually given you an extra year for that date to be aware of. So again, the database, if you're running 11.204, because a lot of customers, when they implemented 12.1.3, they implemented it with 11.204. So you see actually a large number of customers with Oracle Database 11.204 running Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3. So that's why I'm going to focus in on both here. Some of the other key dates here to kind of look at and understand is that for the application server, extended support for the application server, and again, for the application server, there's 2 versions of Oracle Application Server running in the Oracle Business Suite environment. So for the web piece, providing that web connectivity to the application is running at Oracle Application Server 10.1.3, and to provide the Oracle Forms and Oracle Reports is there's actually a second version of the application server running in the same technology stack, and that's 10.1.2. It's important to note these dates. Again, Oracle doesn't update the technology stack rapidly behind the scenes. So when we talk about the application server in 12.1.3, we're talking about 10.1.3 and 10.1.2, whose dates were June 2017 and December 2011 for the extended support dates. However, Oracle is providing security patches on an ad hoc basis for those versions, but it does not appear that Oracle is actually resolving security bugs that are reported into that version. They're mostly focused in on the current supported version. So there has not been recent security patches for those 2 versions. And there is an open question to know if there's open security bugs that are not being patched by Oracle, or there's been no security bugs, and Oracle will not disclose that. And finally, the Java version. So the initial version of Java implemented with 12.1.3 was either Java 1.5 or Java 1.6. And there are no more security patches for Java 1.6. Java 1.7, the security patches will end in July 2022. If you want to learn a little bit more about the security implications of Java and the Oracle Business Suite, about a year and a half ago, we gave a very in-depth presentation regarding the Java stacks within the Oracle Business Suite, because you can have Java running on the client, you can have Java running on the server, and actually when you have it running on the server for Oracle Business Suite, you actually have 3 or 4 different versions running, supporting different things. So when we talk about the web for OC4J containers, that's the Java containers, that's how most of the web applications run, that's actually one Java version. There is one Java version for the Oracle Forms and Reports. There is another Java version for the database. So you actually have 3 or 4 different Java versions. And when I talk about the Java server version here, I'm talking about the one to support the web OC4J. When you think about the self-service interface, that's OC4J. That's how that operates. That's the JSP pages. That's the servlets. That's the OA framework. That all should be running either 1.7 of Java or 1.6. And again, you cannot be applying security patches unless you're upgrading that to 1.7. And then again, that date ends July 2022. And to give you a reference for Java 1.7, the public updates for security patches that are available publicly, that's you can just download from the internet without going through Oracle support, those ended July 2015. So those ended 6 years ago. Oracle is just continuing support for this. So as you can kind of see the dates here, when the technology stack for 12.1.3 is discussed, there's some very old dates in here. Fortunately for the Java piece, there is not a significant number of security vulnerabilities that actually impact the Oracle Business Suite. It's very hard to exploit those Java security vulnerabilities through the web application. On the client, you're running the Java plugin. On the client side, Java Web Start, there are security vulnerabilities there that you need to address, so you need to keep that updated. But upgrading the server version is not that important as often as upgrading the client side. So we delve down into the Java and the web application server architecture here for 12.1.3. If you start looking at some of the release dates on the right-hand side here, when we talk about these versions of the Oracle application server, be it 10.1.3, 10.1.2, those were released in 2009, 2005. When we talk about the Oracle Apache version, it was released in October 2005. We talk about these other components in detail like OC4J, the Oracle Java server pages, JSP. Again, most of these components were released in either 2005 or 2009. So they've not been significantly upgraded since then. There have been, however, security patches. So Oracle provides security patches, but doesn't necessarily update the version. So as an example here for Apache 1.3.4, that was released in October 2005. Normally, if you were just running standalone Apache, and Oracle uses Apache for the Oracle HTTP server internally, if you were just running a standalone Apache server, every single time you applied a security patch, you would actually update the version. Oracle doesn't do that. What they do is they backport the security fixes from Apache to the current version without upgrading the Apache itself. So fundamentally, you're running, if you're running Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3, you're running a 2005 version of Apache that has a number of security patches to it, but does not have any of the newest functionality, newest capabilities. So fundamentally, a 15-year-old web server is running your core business application. So that's very important to think about and understand when we're talking about these older versions as you get farther behind. One of the reasons that a lot of customers don't upgrade or apply security patches immediately, one is the minimum support requirements for patching. So Oracle has established when you are allowed to apply one-off patches, security patches, or really any patches to the Oracle Business Suite environment, you have to be on a minimum support level. So for 12.2, that's fundamentally 12.2.3 with some additional patches for the AD and technology stack. And for 12.1.3, you fundamentally have to be on 12.1.3. So if you're on 12.1.1 or 12.1.2, in order to apply any security patches to even get caught up to today, you really have to be on what's equivalent to 12.1.3. You have to upgrade the application server to 10.1.3.5, and you have to potentially apply some application technology group patches on top of that, as well as technology stack patches. So a lot of times when we see organizations not upgrading, not applying patches, it's a business issue, but it's also once you get farther behind, it becomes more difficult because you actually do have to do upgrades in order to apply some of these security patches and things like that. So for Oracle Business Suite database support, so again, we're going to focus in a little bit on 11.2.04 here because again, CPUs just ended for that version. You can buy the market-driven support for that, so that is an additional fee. And if you are planning on upgrading from 11.2.04, if you look at this slide, it doesn't really make sense at this point to upgrade to 12.1.02. It really makes sense to upgrade to 19C, which is the latest version of the Oracle database. And again, the end date there is April 2027. So it gives you a lot more runway versus doing a double upgrade. And we'll break down that previous slide just in a little bit more graphical format. This picture is from Oracle. It kind of shows you the different versions along with the timeline. So again, as you can see, 11.2.04 support has ended at the end of 2020. When we talk about 12.1.02, again, that is already an extended support, so you'd actually have to pay a fee for that. One question that always comes up is, okay, there's 19C. Hey, we're going to have to now think about 21C, 22C. For Oracle Business Suite, they're not anticipating having any upgrades to 21C or 22C. Most likely it will be a 23C or 24C because Oracle has changed the naming convention and rhythm of upgrades and version releases for the database to be one of two things, either a long-term release or an innovation release. Oracle Business Suite will not be supporting innovation releases. It will only be supporting in the future long-term releases. So 19C will be supported for a fairly long time with Oracle Business Suite. and there will not be any other database releases until the next long-term release comes out. So that's kind of an important concept. So once you upgrade to 19C, you're on that path for a while, and that will be just applying the most recent updates to 19C, the release update patches to that version will be your plan going into 2027. So now let's kind of talk about very specifically what are the security implications. So at the end of the year, what are you going to start losing? What are the changes? And again, I'm focused in on the security patches primarily, but there are a number of other areas where there is a security implication around Desupport. We'll kind of go through these one at a time now. So first and foremost is the security patches. Next, and we'll talk about more about security patches in a few minutes, but let's talk about some of the other areas first. So there's no security configuration updates. So along the way, Oracle is making changes to the application security, improving it, adding in new things. So again, security is not static. It changes over time. Hackers are figuring out new ways to do things. They're developing new tools. They're finding new vulnerabilities. You've got cross-site scripting. You've got a lot of other different types of security vulnerabilities within a web application. A prime example is the security around HTTP cookies. That's changed over time. Hackers have really gone after that. And Oracle has actually provided new updates and new capabilities to Oracle Business Suite, going back to even 11.5.10 got a few updates, 12.1.3's got a number of updates, and 12.2 is getting quite a few different updates over time. So again, Oracle is changing it. So if you're not upgrading, you're stuck on 12.1.3, this is one area you're missing. So Oracle has released a couple new features in the last couple of years to actually improve the security of the application. Next is there's no technology stack upgrades. As you saw, the technology stack is ancient. When you start looking at 11.5.10 especially, you've got a lot of versions there from 1995, from 2000. For Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3, you've got a lot of versions from 2005, 2009. Again, there's no security patches for a lot of those behind-the-scenes versions. And this is happening both even at the database, 11.2.04, there's no, like Apex has a number of security vulnerabilities. That's not getting upgraded. There's no new versions of that for 11.2.04. The application side is the same. Again, there has not been recent application server security patches. So those have been going back a year or two in terms of no availability of application security patches for 10.1.3, 10.1.2. So Oracle does not pay much attention to the technology stack behind the scenes. So if there are security vulnerabilities, weaknesses in that, they are not dealing with it very effectively. There's no security documentation upgrades. So there has been a few updates recently to the security configuration guide for 12.1. But however, the last ones have been just very minor from October 2020. Before that, the only last major update to the document was somewhere in 2012, as I remember. The other configuration that's important to the Oracle Business Suite is the DMZ configuration. Again, they're adding a few things into that, but they're not changing that dramatically. There's not any major upgrades to that. So one key point to also understand is when we're talking about security patches with Oracle Business Suite, a security patch is a part of a cycle. So for a security patch to be developed, there's a security bug reported to Oracle. They go through and then fix that security bug, and then that security bug comes out in the form of a critical patch update. Oracle Software Security Assurance does not look at security bugs in Desupport products. So when Oracle gets a security bug reported to them or finds one internally in the product, they go through a research. However, that research and testing of products only includes supported products. So as of December, if I report a bunch of security bugs in 12.1.3, Oracle's just not going to do much with them. They may not even research those. Even with market-driven support, there is no guarantee that if it's a big enough bug, it's a minor bug. Oracle is, even under market-driven support, is only doing at their discretion. So they'll decide, hey, is this worth fixing or not? In that version, is it too much work? How many hours does a developer take to do it? So you have no guarantee that, first, a bug was actively researched in a Desupport product, and two was, did they develop the patch even under market-driven support? So one question here that we always have is, hey, if you found just a devastating security bug in Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3 in January of 2021 or in January 2022, would Oracle even fix it? Would they even do anything with it? Would they send out a report and say, hey, you better upgrade now because there is a massive bug in it? Our answer is probably not. They just take those bugs and throw them in the trash and not even look at them in the older versions. So let's talk about some of the CPU risks and kind of delve in on the security patches. So again, as of October 2021, after that date, there are no more security patches for Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3. What does that mean? Where is the vulnerabilities? Where's the risk to your organization and environment? So we like to break this out in one of two ways when we start talking about it. First is, where is your risk? Where is an attacker going to come after you? And you can really break out the attacks and the threats to Oracle Business Suite a couple of different ways. The one way that seems to be best is the type of user. So if you think about your Oracle Business Suite environment, it may be it's internal and you may be external. So you may have a DMZ. And then you can break it out as either authenticated users or unauthenticated users. So again, an unauthenticated user is, let's say we're running iSupplier on the internet. An unauthenticated user can see the login screen. They can connect to the application itself, but they can't log in. An authenticated user would be, for iSupplier, one of your suppliers, or internally it would be your employees and contractors and things like that who access Oracle Business Suite who have a login. The reason we break this out is there's some things you can do as an authenticated user in Oracle Business Suite that gives you a little bit more capabilities and abilities to exploit security vulnerabilities. With Oracle Business Suite, the major issue is that external user. Because again, you have to have some assumption that internally your users are somewhat vetted. You have to get on the internal network. You have to break through the perimeter if you're an attacker to get to the internal application. But again, there's always some risk, and some security professionals would rate the internal risk as great as the external risk. In our opinion, the external risk is far greater than the internal risk. But again, there is always still a significant amount of risk here, no matter if it's internal or external. But again, my environments on the internet, I've now opened it up to 7 billion people who potentially are the population of the globe versus what's ever on my internal network. And then therefore, even if the attacker penetrates the internal network, that takes some time and effort. So the external I can just get to. I can get to your Oracle Business Suite environment today if I can find it, and I can exploit security vulnerabilities. So that becomes pretty significant. So I took a few CPUs here. This does not include the April CPU, which included 70 security vulnerabilities. So these numbers would be significantly greater, but we went back a few CPUs and kind of broke out those CPUs and the number of security bugs that specifically highlighted each of these areas. So where are these security bugs specifically exploitable? So again, anyone who is externally, who can see your Oracle Business Suite environment on the internet, when we kind of did this little analysis here for a number of CPUs and just kind of added up all the bugs there, 18 of those could be exploited in your external environment. 16 of the 18 were high risk. So again, someone has significant access to your Oracle Business Suite environment, be it SQL injection, cross-site scripting, Java deserialization attacks. All those can be devastating to your Oracle Business Suite environment. Some of them more so, where SQL injection, Java deserialization can basically I can just point to your Oracle Business Suite environment, execute a bunch of URLs, and have full access to the environment. Cross-site scripting is a little bit more difficult, but I can basically do a phishing attack, get information from your users, and then basically use that to hijack their sessions and actually get into Oracle Business Suite. Again, an authenticated user, 5 of those required authentication. So I had to be authenticated into the application. But however, in Oracle Business Suite, there are just application sessions given to you. So if you're running different modules like iStore, I can basically I get a session for iStore. So again, to browse the product catalog and things like that, I need a session. So actually 3 of 5 of these, even if you had implemented iStore, any guest user could actually exploit these also. Where then a number of these bugs were in modules that if I implemented the URL firewall and the DMZ configuration recommended by Oracle, 34 of these bugs could not be exploited externally. So those bugs are not in the iStore modules. So as long as I block those modules using the URL firewall, they're not exploitable. But again, they're exploitable internally. 12 additional bugs needed me to actually be into the application as a specific responsibility or be able to access a specific module. So again, when you look at these numbers, these are pretty significant numbers. These are not just a small number of security bugs. This becomes a significant issue in the application. So this is, when we talk about security risks in the application, this is where it's important. This is what's meaningful to the risk of the application, because there are a lot of security bugs. This is not Windows Update where you just kind of apply the update all the time, and again, somebody just can't connect to me and attack me. In this case, someone can connect to your Oracle Business Suite environment as a web application and basically break into it fairly easily. The nice thing about Oracle Business Suite is there's not a lot of detailed exploit code available, but again, at least several times a year, detailed exploit code is published for Oracle Business Suite security vulnerabilities. So how do you actually fix this then? So if you are not upgrading, you're staying on Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3, you're not going to be able to apply CPUs starting in January of 2022. What do you do? What's the answer to this problem? And then we'll break this out by risk. So when we start talking about the different types of risk of users, how do you actually prevent potentially exploitation of some of these security bugs and lock down the environment so I actually have better, I have security even though I may be desupported by Oracle. So when we talk about external unauthenticated users, you're really looking to do two things. One is make sure that DMZ environment is as secure as possible. And there's actually two things that you do there. One is you implement the EBS URL firewall, and you also enable the Oracle EBS external responsibilities, which limits the responsibilities available externally. There's no reason someone should log in as system administrators through your external site. That should be limited to the external site. They have to go through a VPN in order to log into the Oracle Business Suite as things like system administrator or any privileged responsibility. Things available externally should be only what you want external, like iSupplier, iRecruitment, iStore, those types of things. As an alternative to the URL firewall and the Oracle EBS external responsibilities, you can also implement our product AppDefend, which provides a very robust security solution for Oracle Business Suite, especially externally, through virtual patching and limiting of all the extra modules. So there's two ways you can do this. You can implement the way Oracle has their tools that have a number of limitations and weaknesses and are very difficult to configure, or implementing a tool like our AppDefend is a very robust, powerful solution to solve a lot of these problems. Internally, again, now there's a few more things that I should be doing. One is enabling, there's a new feature as of the October 2020 critical patch update for 12.1.3 is the enabled allowed resources. So this is another way to limit some of the resources available internally to modules you're not running. One of the huge security risks and flaws in the Oracle Business Suite that is still there today, even if you're applying security patches, is that everyone on this call today who's running Oracle Business Suite is running financials, HR, manufacturing, Oracle Student System, CRM, and a whole bunch of other stuff. You're running all 250 modules. And everyone's like, no, we're not. We're just running financials. When you install Oracle Business Suite, you get all 250 modules no matter what you do. They are all there. There's 20,000 web pages in Oracle Business Suite. Those are all enabled by default. Even if you haven't licensed, installed, configured, or done anything with that, you have all the web pages available for Oracle Student System. Even if you're not a university or higher education institution, you're still running Oracle Student System. You're still running CRM. The reason you want to run the URL firewall or a product like AppDefend is to eliminate all those things. So you may be running 10 modules out of 250, but you have 20,000 web pages. Our AppDefend product very effectively takes that 20,000 web pages and tailors it with a very simple way to configure it down to exactly what you're running, and therefore blocking at least 90% of the pages that are accessible that may have security vulnerabilities, may have security weaknesses in them, and just limit them totally. So AppDefend is a very effective solution for those Oracle Business Suite customers who are unable to upgrade or on 12.1.3, or even if you're on 12.2, this becomes a very effective solution, but it's an incredible solution for those who are desupported by Oracle because it virtually patches all these known Oracle e-business suite security vulnerabilities as well as protecting against classes of security vulnerabilities. So one of the beautiful things about AppDefend is with the last critical patch update, there were 70 security vulnerabilities. 66 of the 70 were already blocked by AppDefend before you even updated AppDefend. So they virtually patched those security vulnerabilities before even Oracle released a patch for them. There's many additional features and capabilities of AppDefend. Another one is limiting these EBS modules. Again, limiting those 250 modules down just to the handful you may be using. It also provides robust application logging, protects web services, also provides two-factor authentication, as well as providing a layer of protection for mobile applications, as we see a lot of clients running mobile applications like approvals, Fusion expenses, things like that. Again, that's a whole different web application technology stack used by Oracle, and there's actually multiple web application technology stacks used by different mobile applications. So again, Oracle's not a clean application from a technology perspective because there's a lot of components there. There's a lot of different web application frameworks used within Oracle Business Suite as it has evolved over time. And a product like AppDefend handles all those very effectively. And the key here for this discussion today is the virtual patching capability, because again, if you can't apply the security patches because you can't apply them in your organization in general because there's business requirements, downtime requirements, things like that, or you can't apply them because you're desupported, such as running Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3 next year, AppDefend provides that same capability as Oracle to patch it and virtually patches all these security vulnerabilities. And we do it bug by bug. So we go through and analyze the critical patch updates and develop rules specifically for every single security vulnerability patched by Oracle. And again, AppDefend provides a lot of capabilities across the board for not only Oracle Business Suite security bugs, but general classes of security bugs. So it becomes very powerful in that a lot of the security bugs are already patched before even Oracle releases a security patch, because we're providing very broad layers of defenses against things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, Java deserialization, XML external entity attacks. Because a lot of security bugs found in Oracle e-Business Suite are just the same type of vulnerability over and over and over. It just happens to be in a different page. So when we talked about this last quarter, there was about 50 different cross-site scripting bugs in Oracle Business Suite in 50 different pages. The key is AppDefend blocks cross-site scripting bugs for every single page, every single parameter, every single time. So therefore, you don't have to apply the patches because again, AppDefend has already provided that layer of protection for you. So that's the Oracle Business Suite layer. Let's talk about the Oracle database layer, because again, a lot of the Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3 customers are running 11.204, which again, security patches are not available. So what is the risk around the database side? When we talked about the Oracle Business Suite side, we talked about unauthenticated users are a very significant risk and threat to the application. Because again, an unauthenticated user, I can just get to the login page. I can still hack an Oracle Business Suite environment very easily if I can get to the login page. The database is very different. The one strength of the Oracle database is, think of it as a Tootsie Roll Pop. It's very hard on the outside. Unfortunately, it's very soft on the inside. So there is no internal, once you can get into an Oracle database, you can take over an Oracle database. But if I can just see an Oracle database on the network, I can just connect to the IP address, I can try to log in. Only 2 security vulnerabilities in the last 8 years have been ones that I can actually take over an Oracle database without a login. So that's actually really good. That's a very great strength of the Oracle database, that I can't just be on the network and hack it and get in. It's very difficult to do. There are a number of security vulnerabilities that allow me to bring the database down, which are called denial of service attacks. Those let me bring it down, but again, I can't get in, I can't steal data, I can't manipulate data. The risk, however, around the Oracle database is once I can log into the database, if I have any user account that I can get in, even if it has 0 privileges except for allowing me to log in, it still has something called public privileges. Public privileges are assigned to every user. You can't take those away. And there are a large number of security vulnerabilities in the public privileges. So the key to secure an Oracle database, the first layer you always have to be thinking about is, I need to provide security patches because there's these public privileges, because anybody who has a login can basically hack the database. And then we start talking about moderately privileged users. That may be your ad hoc read-only users, things like that. And then I have highly privileged users, your DBAs. It's very difficult in an Oracle database to protect against the DBAs. So DBAs can typically elevate their privileges, even if you try to restrict some of them. In Oracle Business Suite environments, it's virtually impossible to protect Oracle Business Suite against the DBAs. They can always do something to hack it. So what we're really concerned about is those lowly privileged users, those moderately privileged users, and how to protect the database from those. And again, we did the same analysis that we just did for Oracle Business Suite and kind of took 11.204 and did a little bit of a risk mapping. So as you see, the first line here is an unauthenticated user. There's been 3 security bugs that were denial of service attacks. Again, I can bring down the database listener, I can stop people from connecting, but I can't steal any data. I can't get into the application. However, 14 of these security bugs only required public privileges, and there was at least 1 per CPU. And this means all I have to have is create system privilege. This is a very lowly privileged user. This user can't do anything else. They can just execute some standard stuff in the database. However, they can take over the entire database. And then we talk about moderately privileged users. Again, that's typically create procedure, create index, those type of privileges. And then finally, we have highly privileged users. And so Oracle fixes highly privileged user security vulnerabilities. You'd think, why would they even fix that? Why would that be a security vulnerability? Because I have a DBA. The DBA already owns the database. They can always do everything with the database. Well, within the Oracle database, there are things that you can do to limit DBAs. In Oracle Business Suite, you can't do that. But there's things like Database Vault that I can actually limit what the DBAs can do within the Oracle database. These vulnerabilities for highly privileged users around DBAs are things that I can do to circumvent Database Vault. I can circumvent some controls that I put around the DBAs so they can easily circumvent them. In the Oracle Business Suite environment, circumventing those controls are very easy to do in the Oracle Business Suite environment, just the way the application is designed. So we don't discuss much around these DBA type vulnerabilities. We really focus in on the lowly privileged vulnerabilities. Those are very critical to the protecting the application database. So first and foremost, don't start behind. It's always our goal is try to keep up to the latest on the Oracle database. If you are Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3, there is no reason you shouldn't be upgrading to 19C. There's no issue, business reason, except for downtime and a little bit of effort, that you shouldn't be upgrading. There's no application reason. We have not really found many third-party products that have a problem. Vertex, those type of third-party products that are pretty popular, all fully support 19C as far as we know. We haven't run into any issues. So again, the upgrade to 19C is a mostly technical upgrade with a verification from the application team. There's not a lot of application testing required. So our recommendation is always do this upgrade in a test environment that you're doing a lot of testing anyways, and that will find any bugs. We haven't heard of many bugs at all on upgrades from 11.204 to 19C. Then at that point, also make sure you've always applied the latest CPU. When we talk about 19C, the way 19C security patching works is very different than previous versions in that it becomes just a minor version upgrade. So when you install 19C, you get 19.1. The next version you install is 19.2, 19.3. So when you apply the security patches today, you went from 19.10 to 19.11, I think. May have those numbers wrong, but that would be when you apply the security patches, that was the patch. The patch took you from 19.10 to 19.11. So again, after you upgrade the database, if you are going to upgrade to 19C, also upgrade to the latest release update patch as part of 19C. Don't start behind. Don't get this, oh, we went to production with 19.1, even though 19.11 was available today. Make sure you're doing that up to date. So some of the other risks in trying to map those out, the key here is, especially for the unauthenticated users and the lowly privileged users, there is a risk for unauthenticated users is that they may be able to get into the database somehow. They may be able to find an access to the database path, even though they don't have an authentication to start with. They may be able to find a weak password or something like that. So most of the first ones here, how do I block out as much as possible? And so we'll kind of go through some of these. First and foremost, if you want to do something and protect your databases, the number one recommendation we always have is limiting database access. If you want to have a secure database, if people can't connect to the database, they can't hack it. You have to then go through the application or something else. So you can cut out a huge amount of risk by limiting database access. This is very easy to say, and it's very easy to write a PowerPoint slide, but it's very difficult to do it in reality. Because again, when you think about everything connecting to your database, you've got the DBAs connecting, you've got the application connecting, you've got backup software, you've got management software, you've got reporting tools, you've got ad hoc users, you've got interfaces, you've got customizations. There's just so many things connecting. So anything that you can do to limit that access is meaningful. So one key way is having a firewall in front of the data center. So not everyone on your internal network can connect. We've got some organizations where we were recently, they have 100,000 different clients, PCs, laptops, whatever, phones on their internal network. So their internal network is basically 100,000 different devices. All 100,000 devices could connect to every single Oracle database. Is that appropriate? Does all 100,000 people need to connect to every single Oracle database? The answer to that's probably no. So having some sort of limitation there, and there's a number of ways you can do this. You can put up firewalls in front of the data center. Within Oracle itself, you can do valid node checking, connection manager, or 2 effective solutions with Oracle Business Suite. But again, those are now down to IP addresses, so I have to know who's connecting. So usually the solution is, if I block access to the data center level, then you say, well, our DBAs need to connect and our ad hoc users have to connect. Well, an effective solution around that is then doing a bastion host. So if I need to connect to an Oracle database and actually execute SQL against it, going in through SQL Developer Toad, I then need to go to a bastion host, which is like a Windows terminal server, Citrix server, things like that, where I then get a virtual desktop. That virtual desktop is then limited to exactly what I can connect to. So I've now limited, I've taken my 100,000 devices on my internal network, and I've probably now gotten it down to a few hundred people who are then authorized to go through that bastion host that are then allowed to connect to Oracle. So that becomes a very effective security solution. The biggest problem for unauthenticated users is they can then try to find a weak password. When we do incident and breach response, the vast majority of the times is someone found a weak password in Oracle database, and then we're able to connect, and then we're able to cause problems. We have not found ever an incident where someone was able to see the database on the network and just hack into it from just on the network without getting into the database through some sort of an account. So they either compromise someone's credentials by going through their laptop or do a phishing attack or something like that, or all they do is connect to the database and they try a bunch of default passwords and users, and those are out published. So if you just Google Oracle default passwords, there's spreadsheets, there's lists of people who give you, hey, try these different accounts and these passwords. And when we do our security assessments, we find about 90% of the databases that we assess have one or more default passwords. And so you can check these. You can use the Oracle built-in DBA users with that password, which has a number of limitations. It's a limited set of accounts and only looks at a single password for each account. There's a number of tools out there like Orca BF. BF is brute force. And so there's a number of command lines tools out there that they're not super easy to run. Our own tool, AppSentry, again, checks the validation of your Oracle Business Suite database application servers. One of the things it does is it tests all your database passwords. And we can test over 1 million passwords per account in 7 seconds. So when we go through and you have 100 accounts, we test all 100 accounts with 1 million passwords each, and we can do that within a minute or so. So that becomes very powerful, and again, finds a lot of bad passwords. And again, AppSentry, you can even add in custom passwords based on your own product names, passwords that are frequently used in your organization. And again, most of the time we find it being welcome1 is the typical password, because in the Oracle environment, well, welcome1 for some reason seems to be a very popular password. However, there is a backdoor in Oracle Business Suite. So there is the APPLSYSPUB account, and everybody knows the password's pub. Oracle does not recommend you change the APPLSYSPUB APPLSYSPUB account from the default password of pub. So the first thing we always do is we find your Oracle Business Suite database, we connect as APPLSYSPUB with the default password pub, and that account should be very limited. And Oracle says, hey, this account does not have any privileges that allow you to hack the database, which is true. However, Oracle also says, as the second caveat, is you must apply the database security patches the day they are released. The problem is not everybody applies the Oracle E-Business Suite security patches for the database the day they are released. Very seldom does that ever happen. I don't think it ever happens, personally. So they're saying, no, yeah, it's fine. It's a fine account because you've applied the security patches, so therefore you can't exploit anything in the public packages. However, in reality, the database security patches are typically applied 60, 90, 180 days or more after release. So that gives someone a wide window of vulnerability and ability to attack an Oracle Business Suite environment, because all I do is now connect as the APPLSYSPUB account and then exploit a recent security vulnerability, and I own the entire database. So again, this password should be changed. There's meta-link instructions on how to do it. If you just search APPLSYSPUB password within my Oracle support, you'll get a reference note on how to actually change the password. Again, you can't just change the password at the database layer. You have to change it both at the database layer and at the application layer. There's a couple privileges in production that should be limited because there are potential security vulnerabilities around those. The two big ones are create procedure and create any index. So anybody who has create procedure and create any index, one or both of those privileges, has the potential of taking over the database via security vulnerability. So again, if you take those away, just helps improve it. But again, there's always potentially other avenues and issues. So that was kind of a brief background talking about the security implications around Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3 and why you should be thinking about upgrading, or some of the ways that you can actually mitigate those security risks if you are not upgrading. And we did that both for 12.1.3 and also talked about the database. And again, they kind of work hand in hand, that if someone can compromise the application, they compromise the database. But if I compromise the database, I can also compromise the application. So I'll turn it back over to Phil to see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Steve. We do have a couple of questions here. First one being, what is the difference between market-driven support and standard support for patches?
Yeah, so very good question. So I talked briefly about market-driven support. So again, market-driven support is if you are unable to upgrade either the application 12.1.3 or the database 11.2.04, you can purchase from Oracle for an additional fee. It's fairly expensive. Pricing is not released by Oracle, so I can't divulge exactly what the pricing is, but it is expensive. And they will give you a certain set of services that are less than extended support. So again, you drop down the level of service that they'll still take your phone call, and they will still provide you security patches at their discretion, and they will also provide you Severity 1 patches at their discretion. For Oracle Business Suite, they'll also provide Severity 2 patches at your discretion. One of the key differences, especially at the database side, for the database patches under market-driven support, is that they will be only released in the form of patch set updates, not security patch updates. So remember, a patch set update includes non-security patches, so it's a little bit bigger patch. So if you have not applied a patch set update, a PSU, before, you'll have to apply a PSU, which will include a significant number of non-security fixes. Not a tremendous barrier to entry, not a huge issue for a lot of clients because a lot of people have been applying patch set updates. But again, it just provides more, introduces more risk, more issues potentially because you're applying a bunch of other fixes versus exactly just the security fixes you want. For the Oracle Business Suite side, the security patches are not released immediately with the standard critical patch update. So again, the critical patch update for April, I think, was released April 20th. I need to go back and check. Like for the 11.5.10 patches, they didn't get released for at least a week or two after the initial release of the 12.2, 12.1.3 security patches. So again, there is a delay for the Oracle Business Suite patches, and that may be getting farther extended over time. So if it was a week, a month, that would probably be expected for the market-driven support. So again, it's not instantaneous.
Next question. How do you upgrade from 11.2.0.4 to 19C?
Yeah, so if you're staying on Oracle Business Suite 12.1.3, we do recommend you upgrade to 19C. That at least gets you around the issue on the database side, especially if you're still on 11.2.04. So how do you go from 11.2.04 to 19C? The really nice thing, which is unusual from Oracle, is there is a direct upgrade path from 11.2.04 to 19C. Having talked to a number of customers who have done that upgrade, it's not a significant upgrade. It is the same upgrade if you've already done an 11.2.04 to 12.2 upgrade. It's fundamentally the same upgrade because 19C is really just an extension of 12.2. They really just renamed 12.2. So instead of just doing the standard naming convention of 12.2, they just went along and changed the name. So really, if you think of 19C, 19C is just another variation of 12.2. So the upgrade from 11.2.04 to 19C is really not that bad. It's a big upgrade. It's a major upgrade, but it's not out of control type of upgrade. And versus the application upgrade, where we see a lot of our clients not upgrading 12.1.3 because an application upgrade is so extensive, so major. A lot of money, a lot of resources. It just doesn't make sense for them because, again, they're planning to go to the cloud in a number of years. So why spend all that time and money today going from 12.1.3 to 12.2 when we're going to go 12.1.3 to the cloud in 2 to 5 years? Why spend that money now? Versus on the database side, it's a technical upgrade with a validation on the application side to make sure that nothing breaks. But we have not heard of any cases where, hey, we upgraded 19C, we saw all these problems. Actually, some people got better improvement because they actually did some rehosting at the same time. We had one client who dramatically better improvement with 19C because they were actually able to rehost at the same time on their database servers and get the improvements out of 19C with the better hardware. And they said the thing flies now. That was kind of one comment. And there just wasn't that significant of an upgrade issues. They didn't run into major bugs. A number of customers have already done it. So you're not on the leading edge there.
Next question. Is AppDefend virtual patching the same as applying Oracle security patches?
So this is one of the most common questions we get around AppDefend. And AppDefend is virtually patching the security vulnerabilities as well as the Oracle security patches. And we contend in some cases it's better because now you actually get alerting also if someone's now trying to exploit those security vulnerabilities. So not only are we closing the same security bugs that Oracle is patching, and typically the Oracle patch behind the scenes just adds in just an if statement or something like that. There's just, like for cross-site scripting, they just add a fix around to validate if something bad is being passed in. That's the change in a lot of these security vulnerabilities by Oracle is all they're doing is adding in just a call to another function to validate that what you're passing in is not a cross-site scripting attack. SQL injection becomes a little bit harder, but all they're doing behind the scenes is just taking a dynamic SQL statement and changing it to a bind variable. So AppDefend is providing you that capability and doing that job, just not in the code. It's just doing it ahead of time in front of the application. So it's as effective, but it also gives you the layer of protection from these classes of web vulnerabilities before Oracle even patches them, and then provides you logging capabilities, alerting capabilities, limiting the modules in Oracle Business Suite to only what's vulnerable. So in many cases, AppDefend has already blocked the vulnerability because we blocked the web page. If there's a web page in Oracle Student System, you're not running it. Internally, you're running it today. It's allowed. AppDefend had already blocked that. So we block all those extra modules. So if a security vulnerability is one of those 20,000 pages that you're not using, you're not vulnerable if you're running AppDefend. If you're running just standard Oracle, you are, unless you now have configured allowed JSP pages and things like that. So it takes a lot of time and effort to do that, where AppDefend provides you all those capabilities out of the box.
All right, I think that concludes our questions and our webinar for the day. I want to thank everybody for spending time with us this afternoon. And also, please be aware that we will not have a webinar in June, July, or August. So we'll be back together with our e-learning sessions come September, and we'll see everybody then. So have a good rest of the week and a great summer. Take care.